Nestorianism is another heresy associated with Antioch, named after the bishop Nestorius. The bishop? Leaders in the church? Yeah. Leaders in the church were tasked with teaching the faith and understanding the faith, and sometimes they got it wrong. His followers and he were condemned as a result, but he was a bishop. And this anticipates where we're going with this discussion. This anticipates the next cluster of heresies, the one that's associated with Alexandria. Down in Alexandria, they had a really high respect for Jesus' divinity. And they wanted to protect Jesus' divinity and his unity. And Nestorius heard reports that down in Alexandria, in the liturgies, in the worship services, Mary was being referred to as Theotokos. Okay? Tokos means bearer. Theos, God. So Theotokos means God-bearer. Or if you like, mother of God. They were describing Mary as mother of God. And he objected. So that's inappropriate language. He said, a better word would be Christotokos, mother of the Messiah. Or, if you're going to call her Theotokos, you have to also call her Anthropotokos, bearer of a human being. Now, when I heard that, I thought, well, that sounds fair. That sounds right. But Nestorius was arriving at these conclusions out of a different set of assumptions. The divine and the human were not just distinct, but separate. And his followers were even clearer about this, that they referred to really two persons. Jesus' divinity is one person, and Jesus' humanity is the other person. And the unity of those two is a kind of moral unity, a unity of cooperation and support. All right? So technically speaking, Mary mothered only Jesus' human side, only his human self. She was not the mother of the person of God the Son. Okay? Now again, I don't know, maybe that sounds reasonable to you. And you're probably among the vast majority who denied that Mary was God's mother when I gave you a quiz about it earlier. What's wrong with Nestorius' case? Why did the church reject it? Well, let me give you two prongs. First, you don't mother just a nature, you mother a person. Motherhood describes a relationship between persons. My mom and dad didn't just parent my stuff, they parented me. You know, Mary visits Elizabeth in Luke chapter 1, and she says, what is this grace granted to me that the mother of my Lord is visiting me? Elizabeth got it. The mother of my Lord. Jesus took on human life. Jesus took on human life with all of its rules, with its structures, with its authorities, and the like. And what would it mean that Jesus only, that Jesus is a name for the cooperation between two persons, a divine one and a human one? We're back to God being merely our creator and us being merely creatures who cooperate. And maybe Jesus is the one time when we cooperate successfully. But we're not in a new world of a new set of relationships. Where the second person of the Trinity is our brother. And the first person of the Trinity is our Father. Well, really, we're back to adoptionism. We're back to, if we do it right, then cooperation, assistance, fellowship is the result. You can see why these are put together under one umbrella. In Ebionism, Jesus is a prophet that calls us to faith and obedience. And so if we believe and obey and all that, then God gets what God is after by calling us prophet. With adoptionism, Jesus is the example that shows us how to get an A. And here, Jesus is the successful cooperation that, again, shows us how to cooperate as well. The church concluded that Jesus is one person of two natures. Jesus is not two halves or two persons, but one person. Therefore, in Jesus, human and divine are truly united. And because they're united, we gain a personal relationship with God through the Son. We gain His Father as our Father. Right? We gain Him, the Word, the second person of the Trinity, as our brother. And for the very same reason, God gains us as brothers and sisters. And God gains Mary as mother. Mary is not mother of the Father. Mary is mother of the Son. But since the Son is God, Mary is the mother of God. All right? Or to put it a little more crisply, if Mary didn't bear a person, if Mary didn't bear God in her womb, how can we say that the cross bore God? If God isn't personally involved in that relationship with Mary, how is God personally involved on the cross? This is demonstrating a principle that when you change a detail in a wrong direction, other things start going horribly wrong. It cascades into other reinterpretations and other consequences that suddenly bring us into a Jesus that we don't really recognize as the one in the Gospels. Now, where is Nestorianism? Well, actually, Nestorian churches outside the Roman Empire refused the correction and continued. They were prolific missionaries. The Nestorian church made it all the way to China. And there are, to this day, Assyrian churches that are Nestorian. Not a very large number, but they're there. What about within the church? What about Christians who take on Nestorian ideas? Well, here's where I wonder. When I see Jesus' life portrayed as a kind of battle between his divinity and his humanity to see who will win, that suggests to me not just a distinction in his natures, but a divide or a separation. When I see renditions of the wilderness temptations, after 40 days, the human Jesus is hungry, but the divine Jesus powers through and defeats the weak, tempted human side. What? It doesn't say his human side was tempted. It says he was tempted in Hebrews. He was hungry. Likewise, it wasn't just his body that was buried. He was buried. He was raised. I don't think it's helpful to think of Jesus in a civil war of his own natures. Think of Jesus as someone who is truly both, truly human and truly divine. And so it is the person who is tempted. It is the person who goes through all these things. And in him, those two natures are at peace. They're one. They're appropriate for one another. Don't think of humanity as necessarily pulling against divinity. That's a kind of Gnostic mindset that thinks of humanity as incompatible with divinity. They're utterly different, right? God is other. but they're utterly different in a way that makes them compatible. One of my children asked me once, how can, it doesn't make sense that Jesus could have died if he's God, which will take you in a Nestorian direction if you take that in the wrong way. Maybe only his human half died. And I was like, well, actually, Jesus is mortal because he's human, but he's also immortal because he's divine. He's not half and half, he's truly both. And he's like, what? That doesn't make any sense. You're contradicting yourself. Well, think of a book. Books are flammable. And a book isn't just pages and ink, right? It's an argument. It's a thesis. Its substance is, on the one hand, the substance of wood and ink, and on the other hand, it's the substance of an argument. It's the substance of its content. And you can burn a book, but you can't burn the argument. The argument's not flammable. But the argument is bound up with the book. The substance of an argument and the substance of a codex, a bound publication, are not similar. They are totally dissimilar. But they're totally dissimilar in a way that makes something fully both. A book is not half argument, half wood, right? You're going to notice this when we go over to Alexandria and look at some of those heresies. A struggle between natures kind of makes those natures out to be similar to one another, similar enough that they can compete. But they're non-competitive. They're too different to be competitive. Persons are competitive. Persons rebel against persons. Persons sin against persons, or persons are right with other persons. But you wouldn't say the same thing about natures. It's a category mistake. So beware when you see Jesus portrayed this way. I think it's a misunderstanding of who the enfleshed Word is.